Okay, YouTube, let's be honest. I might have a confession. I may have finally done it. I may have tried to put too many ideas into one project and not quite sure if it cohesively came together at the end. But hey, you guys can be the judge. That being said, hello and welcome. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. My name's Rain and this is my craft channel. I try to release unusual and different crafts each week, so hit that subscription button and you'll be sure never to miss one. I'm back this week with another box frame diorama, and this one is centered around a mad scientist lab. Now, I've got lots of different modes to this diorama. As you can see here, it's got the lights lit up behind the bottles, we've got a neon thing going on, and we've got some other flashy lights. Yes, that sounds like a lot, and yes, you are right. Of course, to make a box frame diorama, you're going to need a box frame. And here I've just used some popsicle sticks to create shelves and different layers at the bottom. And as you can see, I've already gone and positioned my lights around the frame of the box. I've used brown paper parcel tape for this to hold everything in place, plus that's easy to paint over. Now the boxes around the sides were quite easy to make. I just cut up some, you guessed it, coffee stirrer sticks. These are perfect because they're deep enough and thin enough to give me that box shape. Although I must admit, I realised that buying a huge bag of these only cost the equivalent of one coffee. So yeah, I ended up buying my own in the end. So I wanted these boxes to look like electrical boxes, and of course they're going to need pipes. I happen to have some plasticky things I picked up at a car boot, and they were perfect for these pipe shapes. They had lots of bends in them that I could use for the corners. But you know what, if you've got them, plastic straws will work just as fine for this kind of project. You may notice there are two different types of lights here. I kept the nice warm white lights for the bottles in the background, and I kept the more clinical bright white lights for those electrical boxes around the frame. And of course, we've just got to paint the whole thing black. Now the reason behind this was that I wanted to make this whole project look like it was made of metal. Now the only way I could do this was using my silver luster dust. I must admit, I make a bit of a mess here, but eventually I do get that look I want, and the black paint behind it really did help bring out that silver and buff it up into a shine. There we go. There's still a long way to go with this, but it's started to get there. Let's move on to making some of those bits for the inside. So, the distillation bottles. I knew that these were kind of a sciencey thing. I had a few glass bottles, and here I'm purely taking a bit of silver wire and I'm wrapping it around a stick that I've got to create that spiral look. I then push that wire quite deep into the bottles because I believe the distillation pipes, if that's what they're even called, go straight down into these science bottles, and I knew that one of the bottles wasn't going to have much liquid in it when I'd finished, so I still wanted that to be seen. I do actually make two of these. I only go on to use one of them, but if you wanted to use these in your project, it's a really cute, cheap little way of making these distillation style bottles. Now, let's get on to that test tube rack. The problem I had with this project was size. Now, a lot of the little things that I wanted to put in this project, if I was to buy, say, off of eBay or somewhere like that, they would normally come in doll's house sizes, which is always too big for my smaller project. So I had to make this test tube rack from scratch. It turned out to be relatively easy. Here I'm just punched a few 3 holes into a little popsicle stick, and I'm using a Dremel tool to slightly widen those holes until they're big enough for me to fit a bit of plastic tubing through. And now we've got our little popsicle sticks of holes in. You're going to need 2 popsicle sticks to make just one test tube rack, and I fitted the little bits of tubing in there to act as the glass test tubes. You can of course make these like 5, 6 tubes long, but I didn't have much room on the shelf, so I only made 3 in the rack for me. Once I had the tops and bottoms to my test tube rack, I stained them all a brown wooden colour, and then I also used some more popsicle sticks just to create the sides there, and stuck them all together. Okay, filling up bottles and all the little knickknacks. So I just got a load of my glass bottles together. I was a little bit concerned about the tops to these bottles because I didn't really like the cork look, but once I looked at the bottles, I figured when far enough away, you can see on the top ones there, those little glass rims do kind of act as a top for the bottle anyway. So I just put a load of neon stuff together into these bottles, some beads into some liquids into other. I used distilled water for those that I used coloured liquids in so it doesn't go mouldy at all. And here I've decided to just bring some other little objects that I had. I had this circular little It may have been a lid to something. I thought it looked like a little dish, so I chucked in some glue, some black beads. I found a tiny little spoon that I had, and I also rest that on top with some more of these beads and glue, just to create interesting objects in and around this project. Now, I have been crafting for many years, so my craft stock has built up over that time. But you can always find these sort of little bits and bobs at different places like car boots and charity shops. And to be honest with you, my nephews are a great source of being able to get these objects for me. Let's move on to the flashing control boxes. For this, I simply used Word, I measured my boxes and created some black triangles to fit the exact size. I wasn't too sure on the imagery that I wanted, but I just found some pictures online and I made those a negative, and I also printed out some stickers for later on. Now, I had to bring out my light box for this, purely because these little lights were so small and I wanted them all in different colours. But here, I've just printed all that out on a piece of acetate and I've laid some tracing paper over the top, and using the light box I can see through easily and light up all those different switches into different colours. Now, I made the mistake of using a marker that was water-based, and these eventually will fade pretty quickly, in fact. So if you are going to try this project, or if you're going to use this in some sort of way in some of your projects, try to stick to some of those alcohol markers like Sharpies, because the colour vibrancy will stay through right to the end of the project and will have a little bit of longevity to it. Here, I'm simply gluing the front of those boxes on with a bit of PVA glue and just letting them dry. If I was to redo this project, I'd probably do these little images on these boxes differently, or at the very least not include them at all. Onto the microscope. Now, this microscope is Diddy and I didn't really have a plan, so I just started grabbing some wooden bits, parts that I thought sort of looked like a microscope, and literally just started sticking them together. As you can see, I kind of got the bend there and the little bit that you would put slides on, and then I've just added another square piece of wood and a tiny little dowel at the top, just to act like the bit that you put your eye on. Yet we're using all the scientific proper terms here, so we'll just keep on rolling. Now, this teeny tiny microscope needed some teeny tiny paint job, and a good little tip here if you're making anything small, as you can see I've stuck this microscope to a lollipop stick just to act as something that I can be able to move it around with, easier to paint, easier to lift off, and once the whole project's done and dry, you can either easily take that off with a Stanley knife, or if you're not used that stronger glue, they should just wobble off with a little bit of pressure. I was a little bit worried about making this microscope because I knew this project needed one and I knew it needed to be small, but do you know what? I just sort of threw it together to give the general idea of a microscope, and I think it turned out alright. Now we've made all those scientific lab style bits and bobs, we're just going to go ahead and put them into the diorama, and I was just playing around with a few bottles, seeing what colours worked together and what didn't. I do go on to fill some of the bottles up with powders, which for a lab diorama I think works pretty well. Now, I knew I wanted a tank of some kind, and I had this little plastic box. I think it held pins at one point, and I just put some coloured tubing, mirrored back inside, and then finished it off with some glass paints and some little mossy bits to give the impression that things were growing on the inside. Now, from growing to glowing, I'm adding some little neon paints here to the inside of the test tubes to look like there's remnants of some, I don't know, liquids or some tests that they have been doing in test tubes. I'm not sure, but I just figured that the neon glow here would really pop once it goes into its nighttime illuminated mode. And there's our test tube rack. Like I say, I do make two of these and I put one at the bottom of the project, and a little tip was that I use cocktail sticks and a tiny amount of paint to go in at the bottom of the test tube to look like all the substance was there at the bottom. Now, this little plastic brick I had, and then I also had these little plastic circle pin things, I'm not sure, but it kind of looked like it was something scientific-y, so I put them together and put them into the project. One thing I love about making dioramas is taking things that are not intended for their purpose and repurposing them into things that I would like. Now we're almost there. I do go ahead and make some changes, so for the eagle-eyed viewers of you out there, see if you can spot the difference between this sort of finished project to the one that I'll show you in a minute. As I said at the beginning of this video, I think this craft project may have fallen foul to my craft gremlins trying to shove too many ideas into one diorama. Still, there was a lot of things that I did do in this project that I enjoyed and liked, and I'll definitely be reusing them in other projects going forward. I just have to remind those craft gremlins to slow their horses and to spread their creativity over several projects. And there you have it. A mad scientist lab box frame diorama, complete with all the different scientific bottles of potions and lotions he's going to need, along with all the different signage and those flashing electrical boxes going off around the outside. I really do like those little test tube racks and that microscope, and it's just proof that if you need something for a diorama, don't be afraid to try and make it from scratch and keep it as simple as possible, unlike this project. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and thank you for sticking around. You might as well go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you definitely don't miss next week's craft. And as always, I have been Rain, you have been fabulous, and I hope to catch you again soon. Bye bye.